Today we are going to see about classical genetics. So in classical genetics we are going to study about the transformation of the genes. Okay, ma'am. So here we are going to study about genetics. Here this genetics deals with the hereditary, that is inheritance character. Okay, ma'am. The hereditary. Okay, ma'am. That is hereditary means what? Inheritance character. That is inherited from the parents. That is passing from parent to the offsprings. So today we are going to study about the definition for genetics. So genetics is the branch of biological science which deals with the mechanism of transmission of character from the parents to the offspring. Okay, ma'am. So genetic is the branch of biological science which deals with the mechanism of transmission of character from the parent to the offspring. And this term, the genetic, was given by a scientist known as W. Bateson. Okay, W. Bateson in the year 1906. He classified the genetics into four major subdisciplines. Okay, he gave four major subdisciplines of genetics. The four major subdisciplines of the genetics are transmission genetics, and it is otherwise called as classical genetics. Next one is molecular genetics. Third one is population genetics. Next one is quantitative genetics. First we are going to see about transmission genetics. This transmission genetic is otherwise called as what? Classical genetics. Here, this deals with the transmission of the gene from the parent to the offsprings. The foundation of this classical genetics came from the study of the hereditary behavior of the 7 gene by the Gregor Mendel. So, because of this 7 characters only, they had an idea about this transmission genetics. The next you are going to study about molecular genetics. Here it deals with the structure and function of a gene at molecular level. Okay, ma? So molecular genetics means what? It deals with the structure and function of a gene at a molecular level. Population genetics. Population means what? It is a group of individuals is called as what? Population. Here, the study it is dealing with the hereditary in a group of individuals for a trait which is determined by few genes. Okay, ma? Here, it deals with the hereditary. Hereditary means what I told. It is the transmission of the character from the parent to the offspring. So this hereditary, it is the study of the hereditary in a group of individuals. Okay, ma? In a group of individual, and where the traits, okay ma, traits means what? It is a character. So the characters are governed by the traits, that is the characters are determined, okay ma, determined by few genes. Okay ma. The next you are going to study about quantitative genetics. Here it deals with the hereditary of trait in a group of individual where the traits are governed by many genes. Okay, ma. So in the population genetics, you studied that the trait is governed, that is determined by few genes. Okay, ma. In quantitative genes, it is determined by many genes. The character is determined by, governed by many genes. Now we are going to see about hereditary and variation. Genetic is often described as a science which deals with hereditary and variation. Hereditary. So hereditary means what? It is the transmission of the character. Okay, ma? It is the transmission of character. It is the transmission of the character from the parents to the offspring. Offspring means what? The young ones. Next one, variation. Variation. The organisms belonging to the same natural population or a species that shows a difference in the character. Okay, it shows a difference in the character is called as what? Variation. Okay, ma'am. Variation means what? Difference. Difference in the character. Difference in the character, it is called as what? Variation. Here the variation is of two types. One is continuous and another one is discontinuous variation. So variation is of two types. One is discontinuous variation and another one is continuous variation. Hereditary and variation. Genetics is often described as a science which deals with heredity and variation. Heredity. Heredity is the transmission of characters from parents to the offsprings. Variation. The organisms belonging to the same natural population or species that shows a difference in the characteristics is called variation. The difference in the character is called as variation. Variation is of two types: discontinuous variation and continuous variation. Discontinuous variation. Within a population, there are some characteristics which show a limited form of variation. Example, the length of primula. It has two different length of gynoecium and two different length of androecium. In discontinuous variation, the characteristics are controlled by one or two major genes which may have two or more allelic forms. These variations are genetically determined by inheritance factor. Inheritance means it is transferred from the parents. The phenotypic expression is unaffected by environmental condition. This is also called as qualitative inheritance. Continuous variation. The variation may be due to the combining effect of environmental and genetic factors. Variation may be due to the combining effect of environmental and genetic factors. In a population, most of the characteristics exhibit a complete gradation. That is, a series of successive changes from one extreme to the other without any break. Inheritance of phenotype is determined by the combined effects of many genes. And many genes means it is called as polygenes, and environmental factors. This is also known as quantitative inheritance. Example, human height and skin color. Importance of variation. Variations make some individuals better fitted in the struggle for existence. They help the individual to adapt themselves to the changing environment. It provides the genetic material for natural selection. Variations allow breeders to improve better yield, quicker growth, increases the resistance and lesser input. They constitute the raw material for evolution. Mendel's experimental system, the garden pea. He chose pea plant because it is an annual plant and has clear contrasting characters that are controlled by a single gene separately. Self-fertilization occurred under normal condition in a garden pea plant. Mendel used both self-fertilization and cross-fertilization. The flowers are large, hence emasculation, that is artificial cross-pollination, are very easy for hybridization technique. Mendel was successful because he applied mathematics and statistical method to the biology, and he also applied law of probability. Probability means chances, okay ma? So to his breeding experiment, okay ma? The next one is he followed scientific method and kept accurate details, okay ma? He followed scientific methods and he kept accurate detailed record that includes quantitative data of the outcome of the process. His experiments were carefully planned. His experiments were carefully planned, and also he used large samples for his experiment. The next one, the pair of contrasting characters. Okay, the pair of contrasting characters which were controlled by the factor. Factor means what? Genes were present on the separate chromosomes. Okay, ma? So it was easy for him to do his experiment. Okay, ma? The parents selected by the Mendels were pure breed lines. Okay, ma? And the purity was tested by self-crossing and the progeny for many generations. Okay, ma? So here he tested the pea planted again and again, and he got the test result as the pure line, that is the same variety. Okay, ma? So only it is called as what? Purity or pure line, pure breed lines. Mendel experiment on pea plant. Mendel's theory of inheritance known as particulate theory. Okay, ma? Here, Mendel theory of inheritance. Inheritance means what I told? It is transferred from the parent to the offspring. Okay, ma? The character or the gene which is transferred from the parent to the offspring is called as what? Inheritance. Here, the study of the inheritance is known as what? Particulate theory. It is known as what? Particulate theory. So he discovered, okay, a minute particle. He discovered a minute particle or hereditary unit or factors, which is known as genes. He performed cross-pollination experiment with several true breeding lines of pea plant. True breeding means it undergoes continuous self-pollination having stable trait inheritance from the parents to the offsprings. So here, what is meaning of stable trait? Stable trait means it is the character that is inherited from the parent to the offspring was same. It does not changes from one generation to the next generation. It is the same for every year. So maintained with the pure breeding line produces offsprings with having specific parental traits that are constant in the inheritance and expression for many generations. So pure line refers to the homozygosity only. Homozygosity means the same character. Okay, ma? If it is tall means all the plants were tall only. If the plant is dwarf means all the plant were dwarf. Fusion of male and female gametes produced by the same individual derived from the same plant is known as self-fertilization. Self-pollination take place in Mendel's pea. The experimenter can remove the anthers. Remove the anther means emasculation before fertilization and transfer the pollen from the another variety of the pea to the stigma of the flowers where the anthers are removed. This results in cross-fertilization which leads to the creation of hybrid varieties with different traits. Mendel worked at the rules of inheritance and arrived at the correct mechanism before any knowledge of cellular mechanism, DNA, gene, chromosomes became available. Mendel's insight and meticulous work into the mechanism of inheritance played an important role which lead to the development of improved crop varieties and a revolution in crop hybridization. Mendel died in 1884. In 19,000, the work of the Mendel's experiment were rediscovered by three biologists, Hugo de Virus of Holland, Karl Kahns of Germany, and Heinrich von Teschermark of Austria.